Hey guys, welcome to HipHughes History. So glad that you showed up again. In this lecture, kind of a mini lecture, we're going to take a look at the kind of the philosophical underpinnings of Federalist Paper number 10. And of course, the Federalist Papers are one of the most important series of essays that were ever written in the United States in terms of governmental papers, because they're being used to persuade states to ratify the Constitution. So they're really explaining not what's in the Constitution, but why the Constitution. So Federalist number 10 is written by Madison. Hamilton and John Jay write the other ones, but Madison is in charge of this puppy. And it's entitled "The Union as a Safeguard Against Domestic Faction and Insurrection." So let's take a look at it. The main purpose of this paper, if you want to kind of pick one word, is factions. And what a faction is, guys, is basically, if you go to the cafeteria table at school, you'll notice that people kind of group themselves. You might see kind of the jocks at one table, and maybe kind of the kids who do really well, the honor society kids at another table, and the whatever, you get the idea. Those are factions. And what Madison says is that in any republic or any government, people are going to kind of just inevitably kind of form factions. They're going to come together as a unit, and they're going to have common interests. And what Madison really fears is kind of the largest faction of them all. And he says the number one defining characteristic of a faction is the unequal distribution of property. So what he basically is saying here is that because of the division of property in society, and that really there's a few with a lot and a lot without a lot, that the largest faction is going to be the po. Is it going to be the po? It's going to be the poor. People without property. And if you think of Shays' Rebellion, this is kind of the idea that, you know, if the majority is the poor and they rise up, their interest might be to eat the rich. And I'm not getting into kind of like classism and, you know, class behavior and this such, but this is really what Madison says. And Madison says there's only two things. You can either control kind of the source of factions, or control the effect of factions. And you can't control the source of factions. He says that liberty is to factions as air is to fire. So you certainly can't control air, right, that feeds fire, and you certainly can't control liberty unless you want to be kind of like a stool, you know, like an idiot. So therefore, the purpose of the paper is to describe how we're going to control the effects of factions, really to protect against the tyranny, not of the few. That's kind of, you know, what many people or some people might say is that we have to worry about the few in society, the rich, the elite that are kind of controlling things. No. Madison says you have to worry about the tyranny of the masses, of the mob, of the poor. So, therefore, we're going to control its effects with a republic. And this is really like a catch-22, because in a republic you have factions, which creates all this kind of like, you know, disdain and, you know, unevenness and yada, yada, yada. But then you need a republic to control its effects. So there's kind of like three main arguments that Madison makes. Number one, he says that if you have a large republic, and you're electing senators, you know, in large blocks and states, that the more people you have, the less chance there is for corruption, because the more accountable the leaders, the good men in society, are going to be to the people, because they have to get so many votes. If you have a very closed society, a very small republic, it's very easy for the people to be fooled, for a charlatan to come in and kind of convince them that he's going to do what's best for the country, and maybe he's only going to protect, you know, the people that are poor. So number one is to control corruption and bad behavior by having a large republic. The other idea is the larger republic you have, the larger the faction becomes, and the larger the faction becomes, the less the faction is going to be able to be unified. So in a sense, a large republic is kind of blunting the force of the faction. So therefore, one large faction really isn't going to be able to control things, because it's already kind of been split up. So if we use this in modern day and we say, well, obviously, you know, if you look at charts or something like that, you can see that, you know, the top 5% own, I don't know what it is, 75% of everything. So why don't you just get the 95% together and eat the other 5%? And the idea is, because the republic is so large, it's very hard to get that 95% to unify, because you have other kind of breakdowns in demographics and interests. Some of those people are very pro-gun, and some of them want gun control, and some of them are religious, and some of them are not, and some of them maybe want, tax cuts, and maybe some of them want, schools improved. So you've kind of taken that faction and you blunted its effect by chopping it up, by having a large faction be even larger, if that makes any sense. And the last kind of argument here is that without a large republic, not only are you going to have the problem of the tyranny of the majority, but you're not going to have a unified country. If we become factionalized to the point where it's just kind of elect your own person that represents your own views, then we're going to be heading towards civil war quite quickly. We're going to break up as a nation. So by having a large republic, and by having all of these voices kind of muted in their factions through the process, then we can stick together. We're not going to have a large enough faction to pull us apart. And of course, he's wrong. He's wrong, because you're going to have kind of this slave landowner faction, states' right faction, and this kind of more northern manufacturing abolitionist faction that's eventually going to split the country apart. But union as a safeguard against domestic faction and insurrection. The main idea here, guys, is there's always going to be factions, all right? If you're free, there's going to be factions. And in order to protect the minority, and I'm not talking about the minority in terms of Hispanics or African Americans or gay Americans. I'm talking about the minority in terms of property owners and rich. In order to protect the minority from the tyranny of the majority, you need to have a large republic. And therefore, you can go kick some you-know-what! Fed number 10. Make sure that you get the main idea, and now you should go read it. Click the link below. I'll give you a couple places. Go to the real site, for real, and read it. Give it a try. See if you can pull some quotes out. And then I'll give you kind of a summary so you can get a little bit more analytical with the reasons. But now you know the basic idea, and there you go. From there, you can climb the steps of learning. All right, guys, check the links below. If you haven't subscribed, WTH, you should subscribe right now. Where attention goes, energy flows. I'm out. We're spin out. Way!